I'm really pleased to say that we are joined by Oscar-nominated director of The Gatekeepers, Dror Moreh, and BAFTA-nominated producer Teddy Leifer. Welcome, both of you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you for bringing us this incredible documentary, The Human Factor, kind of mapping out a little bit of the behind-the-scenes journey, starting kind of at the beginning of the Oslo Accords and going all the way through that decade and early into this century. Dror, I just want to come to you first, following on from the Gatekeepers. What was the decision-making process to kind of, make this film?
It was again for me to expose what went on behind closed doors, which is something that we are not privileged to see, and to try to understand why the most significant effort of diplomacy by the United States in the last 3 decades have failed so miserably to find the Israelis and the Arab neighbors in where they are now. And I wanted to really go there behind the scene and try to crack this riddle, why are we where we are today. That was the main reason for me to do this movie.
And then focusing on the negotiators rather than the politicians, kind of, was it always going to go in that direction, or was there ever kind of a different film where you had the politicians involved as well?
No, from the beginning, I wanted to speak with the negotiators because I believe in professional people. Politicians have a lot of narratives that they have to keep for themselves, that they have to excuse themselves for failing or for succeeding. And the professionals are, for me, are the most interesting people to speak to because they don't have, well, they have kind of interest in this thing, but their job was to bring the two parties together and to reach a deal, and they failed. And for me, what was very interesting is to get from their point of view why it failed. And that's why I concentrated, by the way, in the same way that I did with the Gatekeepers, the professionals. There is something in when you speak to professional people that you believe what they say and you don't think about what is motivating them, what is behind the scene to keep there.
And if so much of documentary filmmaking is about building trust, and I'm just interested in the process, how you got them on board and also how you built that relationship with them, because they shared, like, I've never seen that much kind of shared from people that were so involved in something that, as you've said, it kind of, we've seen it from the politician's perspective or what's been reported in the news, what we've read about, but seeing it kind of from their hearing it from their words was fascinating. So yeah, how you both kind of worked towards building that trust and getting them involved.
Actually, it started with Dennis Ross, who is the main protagonist of the movie. And I asked him basically in one meeting that we had about another project, will he be willing to be with me and share his insights from inside the room? He said, let me think about it because it's his life work. I don't think that he understood what he was getting into, because for me as a director, I believe in long interviews. And I can tell you that with Dennis Ross, I spent almost 35 hours of interviews during 1 or 2 years. With each one of the other people that are in the film, I spent at least 10 to 12 hours, each one of them. So, and during that time they understand that you are not there, as we say, to nail them. You are just there to understand what was the process that went on. And that's, it's a process of building the trust, as you said, and allowing them to express themselves. I think also what contributed to that is the fact that they both, and I feel the same way, that we are in the beginning of a new era. I don't believe that America will engage in trying to achieve peace in the Middle East in the way that it was up until now, having the last attempt by President Obama with the Kerry Initiative, or what President Trump did. But I don't think that America will be engaged in the same way. And I think they wanted also to reflect themselves about the years that have passed and to share their insights with the audience. And that's part of why they were speaking so candidly as well.
Do you think that it's impacted them personally? Kind of, you see it in their eyes, but just obviously after you've spent so much time with them, just kind of, how do you think it's affected kind of their life?
Of course, you know, there was a very, I will tell you a small anecdote. The last day of the interviews in Washington, I went for the dinner with Dennis Ross and his wife, and I shared a little bit of the insights. And then Debbie, his wife, said to me, you know, Dror, I don't think that he takes it too much into his heart, the failure. And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and at that moment I understood that he never shared with his wife the impact of those failure. And I said, look, if I would do a movie for 20 years or 25 years, and at the end it will not go out or it will fail, I will definitely have hard feelings. And you know, your husband have worked 30 years to reach peace between Israel and its neighbors, and he failed. So I'm sure there is a lot of feelings inside invested. And yeah, they are deeply involved in that, each one of them. I mean, Martin Indyk said to me that he had a heart condition because of that. He separated from his wife. They took it very personally, and it was their life mission. And regrettably, they failed. That's the sad thing in that, is that they failed. They failed basically, but mostly the Israelis, Palestinians, and Syrians have failed more profoundly, but they also failed. It's a tragic story of failure.
It is. But what you captures is very much kind of what the title says, the human factor. And what I said before, so often we've seen kind of the politician's perspective, but seeing the perspective of the negotiators, you feel deeply that they wanted peace more so than anything else. And they had almost, it was almost politics for a size. They had no skin in the game almost. They were doing it from a place of wanting that genuinely to be a reality. Dror, you mentioned kind of maybe 100+ hours of footage from interviews. So Teddy, as a producer, how do you kind of negotiate, kind of, helping to pare that down a little bit into the 100 minutes that we see?
Well, I think we tend to just have a lot of arguments. I think the first cut I watched was 20 hours, and it wasn't rushes. I wasn't watching rushes. I was watching quite watchable material, and this was 26 hours, I think, of incredibly intimate testimony. And I think that's what drew me to what I loved so much about The Gatekeepers was that it's this is about a very dramatic topic. And so often political documentaries can leave me feeling cold. And I think that one of Dror's great skills as a filmmaker is to bring that warmth and intimacy, and to have such a good connection with the people he's interviewing that they might, as he says, possibly share with things that they haven't told their life partners, or they might give that. And I think that really comes out in this film. I think those relationships that Dror built in both films are very close. And so it was a big job to cut down. But what we had to keep reminding ourselves, I think, was the mission of the film was really always coming back to what was important to the American perspective, because it's the topic of the film is absolutely, the area that is covered is absolutely vast, but it had a very narrow perspective and focus. And I think we had to keep focusing on that, because otherwise it's just, it's too big, it's too vast. So we just had to keep bringing it back to that.
What was really fun to see was the level of humor within it, and kind of, it's not something you'd think that like, it's not a funny topic, let's be honest. There are not much laughs when you're talking about the Middle East peace process, but there was just some great moments of humor, which again brought kind of the humanity to the situation. And just picking those, it's Dror, to kind of like, how did you pick those, which were the ones, and what did you find, what did you discover kind of more so kind of in those moments about the process as a whole?
It's a human process, and as human, we tend to think that in those rooms there are, well, almost unhuman people that have those to take those decisions. You know, the prime minister, the president is sitting and he's taking, and at the end of the day, I've investigated it a lot in my projects about the human factor, and it's a human process. And in a human process, you have those moments which are sad, which are funny, which are human, which are like our lives the same way, in the same way they act and behave the same way that we be. And first I heard the stories, you know, those amazing stories that they shared with us during the interviews. And then Teddy can elaborate on that more. I had to find a way to tell the story visually. And I cannot tell you how many labs in London or CGI places in London I investigated in order to tell those stories which were told behind the scenes, in order to bring them to life. And at the end of the day, you know, what was amazing is that we found this treasure of photographs, still photographs, that I never knew that existed, of that all those moments were documented. And it was really, for me, an amazing achievement to have those moments being told. For example, one of the funny moments is how can you prevent Arafat from kissing you at the first time that he comes to the White House? And they practice this handshake where the President Clinton is holding him at arm length and kind of a warm embrace. And they practice that, and you hear the story and you say, oh my God, how am I going to tell that story visually? And then you have the photos of that moment again. And Teddy can tell you how much we went into labs in London with this moment of Clinton coming to the funeral of Rabin, and then going down the plane and hugging Paris in a warm embrace, where basically saying, putting on his shoulder, on Clinton's shoulder, the task of reaching peace, or he is going to be that one. And all of a sudden you have those photos in front of me. So there were really, really funny moments, sad moments, heartbreaking moments, which were captured by the White House photographers. And we had the privilege to bring those moments to life and to bring them to the audience. And I think the audience at the end of the day watching this movie is very, very privileged to be what we always dream to be, a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
In those moments, historical moments, where not only that you hear the stories, but you see the real photos that documented those moments. And this is part of the magic, I think, of the movie, of the human factor.
Definitely, those photographs are mind-blowing. They really are, kind of just, and yeah, you're right, the kind of, it's just each moment is illustrated so perfectly kind of through that imagery. I'm wondering if, kind of, when you started on the journey for the film, did you know that you would get access, or that this treasure trove existed, and kind of, and if it so that was quite lucky then.
No, you know what happened is that I saw photos and I asked, where are those photos coming from? And they said, our American archive researchers said, you know, it comes from the White House. So I said, can I see the negatives? Can I see all the photos that they took there? Well, they asked me to file a FOIA, which is Freedom of Information Act. And then 9 months afterwards, we filed like for 15 dates. And 9 months after that, I got almost 35,000 photos in my computer. And I was like a little kid who got, you know, I don't know what is, Teddy is more close to that with his little kids. What is the biggest treasure that a little kid can want? I was like a little kid who got the treasure from his dad, and I was looking through all those photos and trying to understand, what am I seeing here? Is this the time that King Hussein says to Bibi, you are not a leader and you need to learn to be a leader? Is this the time that Clinton held Arafat's hand and told him in Camp David, please accept the offer that Barack is giving you? So it was a really fun process.
Teddy, did you want to comment on that?
No, I wanted to say something about the humor. I think, you know, I happen to split my time between comedy and documentaries as a producer. And we're always looking for opportunities in our documentaries to bring out the humor, because I think that's the, you know, all my favorite comedy is observation of truth. And that's where the laughs come from in this film. We weren't trying to sort of make any cheap gags, but I just think there's, you know, in the lifespan of these people and this enormous piece of history, there's going to be all shades of light and dark, and there's everything from death to laughter. We had on our hands of trying to of telling a very well told story, but with a very specific lens on it. And I think that some of the most successful scenes in the film probably are ones that contain humor, and that's where the humanity lies.
I wonder as well if that sensibility will play out very well to a British audience. I was talking to someone the other day, and they said that kind of what is kind of culturally unique, maybe not, but to the British, is that we'll find humor in any situation, kind of, and that kind of obviously to maybe diffuse something, but kind of that's the one thing that I really kind of, obviously watching this is kind of, just those light moments which you really needed. You needed this, but kind of, playing out really well. You mentioned kind of some of those same moments, about kind of the moment, the pivotal moments, obviously the conversation between King Hussein of Jordan and Bibi Netanyahu, and kind of picking those pivotal moments throughout the film. There's a few of them, kind of how you worked. So there must have been so much, but again, we've got the humor on one side, but we've got the drama on the other, and picking the pivotal moments and how you plot that out.
Well, the story is the story of what went on throughout this period of time. And we concentrated mostly on the Clinton era until the Camp David, because for us, it took time to understand that this was the really last serious attempt in Camp David to reach a final peace deal. And I mean, there were a lot of basically my challenge was, how do you tell a story of dry diplomats, which normally, when we are watching movies, or when we are watching even the news about diplomats, we tend to either turn away from this or go to sleep immediately after that. So my challenge is how to bring those, to create the drama in those moments of negotiations. And I learned a lot through doing this movie, because it was much more difficult than the Gatekeepers. The Gatekeepers, it's the head of the Israeli Secret Service, it's espionage, it's interrogating, it's targeted assassination, it's sexy by its nature. But here, it was people speaking about other people and trying to build a human drama and narrative into that. So the issues were always to try to find the human stories, the interaction between the people inside the room. And I'm not saying that the issues themselves are not really important. Of course, it's important. Jerusalem is important. The right of return is important. The refugees, the borders, the security, all of that is important. But what I found out anew in this film is that if you don't have this human factor, if you don't have between the leaders this kind of bond or connection, which they both have to walk side by side into another future, which will be tough on their societies. If the Israeli society and the Palestinian society or the Syrian society will need to reach a peace one day, they will both won't like it. Both of them won't like it, because it will require hard compromises. And you cannot do those hard compromises if you don't trust the person that is in front of you, if you don't believe genuinely that he believes in peace. And regrettably, especially in the Israeli side, I must say, in the last 12 years of Bibi Netanyahu, and there wasn't really a leader that you could believe that really they spoke the language of peace, but it wasn't really serious. You didn't believe that they really mean that. And on the Palestinian side, it's another issue altogether. There is now two sides of the Palestinian side, the Palestinian Authority, Hamas in Gaza. So it's a complete mess. But one day, if we want to reach peace between those two entities, there will have to be two leaders that can trust each other, that understand that they have to work together in order to reach that. And without the human factor, nothing of that will help. Nothing of what will work.
I think it's one of kind of can't remember who actually, one of the negotiators at the beginning of the film said that, one side's thinking of the past and one side's thinking of the future, and it kind of, you know, it's hard to like marry those things up, obviously, without kind of meeting in the middle somewhere. Do you think kind of, you know, you're right, the last 12 years have been, there's been like no possible resolution for anything, but what, you know, obviously the last couple of months with everything kind of the trouble kind of re-emerging and kind of violence violence again erupting, what do you think is kind of what would be the next step? What is there a next step? Obviously, I know we've have a new prime minister now in Israel. Do you think that, so let's bring it back to the film, do you think that screening the film in Israel could help? Or I'm sure it has been screened there, but do you think it can help?
Well, look, my conclusions from both films, from The Gatekeepers and from The Human Factor, is presented in the movies. I believe in what is said in the movie, that I think we should keep the word peace out of the vocabulary for now. I think we don't have the capacity, not the Israeli society, nor the Palestinian society now has the capacity to reach peace on what, I mean, let's say, end of conflict deal. I don't think that there is really leaders on both sides that can reach that. So for now, we have to try to concentrate on more mutual life, trying to keep life as bearable for both sides, especially for the Palestinian, in my point of view, and to create the atmosphere that someday in the future, probably not in my lifetime, those leaders who will be able to reach a two-state solution, which I don't feel exists now, can do that. Even that will be tough enough to reach an agreement between those sides about coexistence and trying to keep those terms of reaching maybe in the future a peace will be tough enough. So that's my point of view now, especially about regarding what is going on in Gaza now.
And Teddy, kind of obviously coming, you know, being from the UK and being here, kind of making this film, kind of your aspirations, the documentary, the audiences it reaches, and what you hope kind of the main takeaway from it can be.
I think we just, you know, I think it's always useful to remember that ultimately it's human beings making decisions. You know, I totally agree with what Dror just said, and frankly, Israel, based on its most recent elections, has a domestic agenda that is pretty full right now, and is trying its very best to just, as a society living in Israel, not rip itself apart. The Palestinians have a whole set of internal issues themselves. So I totally agree with the conclusion of the film and what Dror said about the aspiration for peace is just like, and use of that word is just so, it's out of reach right now. And living without violence would be a wonderful thing. Living without violence for a prolonged period of time would be a really good starting point. In terms of the rest of the world, I think that you know, it's important that the rest of the world doesn't forget about this, about this region, doesn't regard it as a lost cause. In past, you know, the US has tried and failed. It's been at other times, but I just hope for a return possibility to those kinds of end of conflict negotiations. Audiences being engaged, realizing that it's real lives that are affected by the decisions that are made in rooms is important, and just audiences becoming fluent with the complexities of these issues is in itself a helpful outcome.
Yeah, you kind of think both touch on in the film, and obviously, and now is kind of the idea of kind of it's possibly it has been for a period of time the end of kind of diplomacy, and kind of maybe it's the idea is to try and crawl diplomacy back just a little bit, so kind of integrity can be reinstated in politics, perhaps, just so like you said, Teddy, that you know at least kind of for the moment, there is no violence on either side would be kind of a great step kind of towards, getting back to the humanity of the situation. Dror, I'd love to hear about kind of what you're doing, what your plans, what you're working on, well, what you're both working on next. But what kind of what can we hope to see?
Well, I'm already also working on a project for the last 7 years, I think, which is called Corridors of Power, and it deals with how America responds to genocides after the collapse of the Berlin Wall. What were the discussions inside the room during the Clinton era, the Bush era, and the Obama era for places where there were crimes against humanity, genocide, and mass murder, and why did they decide to intervene in one place and not intervene in another place? And it's a huge project which I'm working, as I said, for the last 7 years. I hope to finish it this year and to premiere it next year. So, by the way, the BBC is inside that as well. So the English watchers, English viewers will be able to watch that on the television screen as well.
And is that kind of from the point of view, was it politicians that you've, from the point of view, or kind of,
No, in that sense, I interviewed only the people that were inside the White House Situation Room, or people that were in the American political system, maybe envoys on the ground, but it's only from the political and the professional American people that were on the ground or on the decision-making room. So yeah, it's from that point of view, because we tend to think that, well, America, all of us as human beings are relieved to say that America is the policeman of the world. Wherever there is someone bad happening, America will solve the problem. And it turns out that America, to put it mildly, is a bit tired of that. That the world puts the onus on their shoulder and say, okay, if there's problems in Syria, America will deal, Libya, America will deal with that, Bosnia, Rwanda, Kosovo, America. And they are a bit tired of that.
What the human factor does show us is kind of almost kind of a domino effect that could have happened. Like if the negotiators had been successful and kind of peace had been reached, perhaps some of the other conflicts that we've seen kind of as a result may well not have happened. So what it does kind of it clears.
Absolutely. If you see, I mean, take Brexit for example, which affected the British people immensely. I mean, can anybody in England say that if, let's say, there was peace between Israel and the Syrians, would there be a civil war in Syria? Would those refugees, those people that fled Syria, almost 5 million people, 3 million now in refugee camps in Turkey, most of them flocked into the European continent, almost changed the entire makeup of the European continent, also England as well. So yeah, if you think that things that are happening here are staying here, you better think twice. It affects your life, it affects everything that we are, and you better be engaged in what's going on in the world, because in the world that we are living, it will reach your doorsteps very, very fast.
I think we're running out of time. We've got one question which is from a viewer at home, and Dror, it's for you. So you've talked about the privilege of the access you had through making this film. Are there any key diplomatic moments that you wish you had access to that you didn't have?
No, actually, all the moments that I wanted to be inside, I was inside. They didn't prevent anything from me from me asking them about. They were very candid and open, and no, there wasn't any moment that I wish I was there and was not revealed to me. And believe me, if there was a moment like that, I would know, and I would not go away
find it.
Yeah, exactly. I would not back up until I will get my answers for that moment.
Dror, Teddy, just want to thank you so much. Thank you for the film. For me, even personally, it was such a privilege to be inside those rooms and like seeing those photos, mind-blowing, and hearing firsthand from people that we never get to hear from, kind of, and putting a very different perspective and kind of an insider's view on the kind of a conflict that kind of is obviously so prevalent today, but kind of has occupied so much of modern history for the last kind of 30 years. So yeah, thank you very much on such a great documentary, and can't wait to see what you both do next.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
No,
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much.